Ovviamente l'auspicio è comunque che questo materiale venga poi segnalato, sia già pubblicato online, in modo da poterlo guardare con... è un peccato presentarlo poi velocemente così, non so se lo pubblicate, magari ci segnalate in quale canale possiamo guardarlo con... ok, perfetto. Poi durante gli interventi poi ce lo potrei dire. E niente, volevo dire, in questo caso mi ha colpito molto il fatto di una città. Tutto bene? La città come luogo di accoglienza per tutti. Secondo me questa è una parola che almeno per me che mi ha colpito molto, la città e il suo museo come luogo di accoglienza per tutti. Mi viene in mente da questo punto di vista anche, insomma, sicuramente molti musei fanno già questo tipo di percorso e sono veramente interessanti perché oltretutto gratificano anche molto gli stranieri, immigrati, nuovi cittadini che vengono coinvolti in questo percorso perché si sentono davvero partecipi al cammino del paese, della società in cui sono inseriti. Qualche anno fa ho avuto anche io un'esperienza proprio con Brera di fare un'esperienza così, coinvolgendo anche tra l'altro un artista che veniva da Modena. Davvero interessante fare poi queste attività in mezzo a quadri molto famosi, era anche da brivido, no? Ma un brivido positivo. Questo per dire, un'esperienza come questa io l'ho già vissuta e devo dire che davvero mi ha gratificato molto. Allora andiamo avanti con i nostri interventi. Con questa volta un ospite speciale che arriva dal Kenya, Victor Odindo Ombonya, regista keniota che ci racconta le esperienze di film nei campi di rifugiati di Dadaab e di Kakuma. Quindi lui ci racconta con delle immagini, forse anche ci sarà un filmato a un certo punto, ci racconta queste esperienze molto intense. Sentiamo spesso parlare di questi campi di rifugiato, abbiamo proprio una persona che ci vive, che svolge esperienze, in questo caso con FilmAid, quindi andiamo a un livello molto alto anche che riguarda la cooperazione internazionale. Quindi diamo la parola subito a Victor. Lui interviene in inglese, ha detto che non era necessario tradurlo, quindi cercate di ascoltarlo con attenzione e dopo Victor poi ci fermeremo per scambiare qualcosa con il pubblico.
Thank you. My name is Victor, and I want to make a small presentation about what FilmAid does in Kenya. I have a presentation. I'm not very sure whether it's in this computer. FilmAid is a humanitarian organization that works in Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps. Dadaab is the world's largest refugee camp. I don't think there's any other camp in the world that has as many people as Dadaab. Right now, there are almost 500,000 people in Kenya who are refugees from different countries. So FilmAid uses the power of film to influence social issues and mobilize communities to respond to the issues that affect them. So this is an aerial photograph of the Dadaab refugee camp, which is on the Kenya-Somalia border. So those little white things you see are tents that people live in. So what about Dadaab? It may not be very clear, but what I want you to look at is there are different people from a lot of countries who are resident in Dadaab. For example, there are people from Burundi, there's one person from Cameroon, there are a lot of people from the DRC, Congo. We have people from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. All of these people are living in the camp. The highest population is Somalis, which stands at almost 95% of the population. So, culture and conflict in Dadaab. So you can imagine if people almost 500,000 people are living in such an environment from diverse cultures. There is bound to be some social problems associated with that. So clanism is one of the main problems, which is intracultural. It's not inter, it's intracultural. So you find that the Somalis are from different clans and different castes. So some of the issues that they have in Somalia find themselves crossing the border into Dadaab. So for example, you find that they cannot marry from different clans. They cannot sit together and discuss issues. They have different political persuasions. So all those manifest themselves in problems in the camp. And then some of these rivalries are very historical. They go back to the history. And the thing about Somalis is it's as if the hatred or the differences are passed from generation to generation. So people get born into a disagreement that they didn't know about. Maybe people were fighting over a piece of land in 1905, you know? So you get born, your grandfather had an issue with someone else's grandfather, and it is passed on until, you know, someone dies, and then their children also take up that. So most of these issues do not have a beginning and sometimes don't have an end. Religion, culture, and beliefs is a big thing. The predominant community in Dadaab is the Somalis. They are Muslim. The South Sudanese and the Ethiopians are Christians. They don't see eye to eye. The Somalis believe in covering your hair. The South Sudanese do not, but they exist in one place. So there are always conflicts that are related to how people were socialized in their countries of origin. So some of these issues come into the camp, and there are some fights and a lot of insecurity associated with them. The major conflict is based on resources. There is not enough resources. You can imagine that we have to provide healthcare, water, shelter, education, and food for 500,000 people who do not belong in that country. So where does this come from? So there's bound to be a scarcity of resources. There's not enough to go around, and this leads to conflicts. Water is a big thing, as you can imagine. So it's always a point of disagreement. Food distribution points. So all these are some of the ways in which culture and conflict manifests itself in Dadaab. So there's the refugee community and there's the host community. Where do the refugee communities live? Of course, they live in the country, but the place where they live also have people who live there. So what are some of the conflicts that exist between the hosting community, and Italy is struggling to be a hosting community because for a long time it has been exporting labor and migrants. Right now it's a turn to receive. So what are the challenges that we face between the refugee community and the host community? The number one challenge is environment. All those houses that you saw, they have to be built using something. So the refugee community cuts down the trees to build their structures. So the environment is getting degraded, and this is a cause of conflict. People dump the waste onto the host community land. It's going to bring problems. The host community has livestock. The refugee community has livestock. So where do they graze? Where do they go for water? So all of these issues manifest themselves in conflicts. And then there's competition for scarce jobs and contracts. Everybody wants a contract. Everybody wants a job. So who gets it? Who doesn't get it? So all these are points of conflict. And then we have been accused, as people who work in the humanitarian world, we have been accused of ignoring the host community at the expense of, we have been accused of giving all our resources to the refugees instead of the host communities, and they don't like it. So they accuse us, and they accuse the international community of neglecting them and focusing more aid on the refugees. So this is a cause of conflict. So this is Kakuma. Kakuma is a camp on the Kenya-South Sudan border. And it also has all these people that live there. There are almost 120,000. They're not as many as the Dab, but they are as diverse. In fact, there are more diversities in Kakuma than in the Dab. There are almost 14 or 15 countries represented in the camp at any given time T. So the majority, as usual, are Somalis, but you also have people from South Sudan. Right now, as you may be aware, there is a conflict in South Sudan, and we already started seeing people crossing over back into Kakuma refugee camp. The problems are similar, as I have mentioned. So, what causes all these conflicts in the region that contributes to the refugee situation in Kenya? In South Sudan, most of it is tribal. We have the Nuer and we have the Dinka, and they have historical rivalries, mostly over cattle. Cattle is a very big cultural issue. The more cattle you have, the more prestige you have. So most of the time, the conflicts are based on these two tribes and the fact that they're always fighting over cattle. So the question in South Sudan is, are these ethnic rivalries that have taken a political stance, or is it a political stance that is has been ethnicized? So that is something that everybody is still trying to focus on. But as you can see, the major cause of conflict now is the president is from one tribe and the vice president is from another tribe, and they have differences, and there's a war going on there. So what this means for us is that we have more people who are coming into the camp and want to be helped. What about DRC? One of the main drivers is minerals and resources, coltran, what we have in the mobile phones, what we have in the computer, what we use for chips. Most of it comes from the DRC. So there's a lot of interest in the resources. Rwanda, Uganda are all countries who have a stake in the mineral industry. And most of them sponsor different rebels at different times to fight for these resources. And all of these have led to instability in the region that causes refugees to seek refuge in Kenya. Somalia has been without a government for almost 20 years. Somalia and Kenya share a border. So if Spain has not had a government for 20 years, what does that mean for Italy? That is exactly the same thing that we are going through. They don't have an education system, they don't have a health system, they don't have a security system. So our border is very porous. So most of the times, if there's any issue on the other side, people come to Kenya. The last such influx was seen in 2011 when there was a major drought that affected the Horn of Africa, and we had a lot of people coming to Somalia and going to Ethiopia for help. So all of these factors make sure that there are always thousands and thousands of refugees in Kenya who need to be helped. Now, how does FilmAid bring together all these diverse communities? How do we make sure that the conflicts that have caused people to come to Kenya are sort of like dealt with? How do we do that? How do we use media to transcend these communal tensions? One of the things that FilmAid has is a mobile cinema program where we make films and then use these films in all parts of the of the camp. The picture that you see is a picture of shoes or sandals that people who have come to watch the films leave outside. So for us, this represents how communities come together and leave their differences at the doorstep using the sandals and step into the world that we have created using the films to engage them, to teach them, and to talk about some of the shared concerns that they have. Because once you're in Dadaab or once you're in Kakuma, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter why you are there. What matters is you're a refugee and your concerns are similar. Everybody wants an education, everybody wants healthcare, everybody wants another life. So that is what has brought everybody together. And that is some of the things we're trying to let people focus on as a community. FilmAid designs projects that explores the youth's perception. If you look at the population slides, more than 65% of the refugee population are people aged below 25. And as you speak, between 10,000 and 15,000 children have been reported to have been born in the camp. So we are raising like third generation refugees from different countries. So if someone from Somalia gave birth in the camps, what does that child become? Is he or is she a child of Somalia? No. Is she or he a child of Kenya? No. So what is their identity? So basically we have between 10 to 15 or 15,000 to 20,000 stateless people. What are we going to do with these people? So through various media projects, we're trying to find out what are their perceptions about their identity. How can the international community contribute towards defining this identity of people like this? Now, some of the examples is we've produced a photography video project called Is the Word Listening? And one of our more recent work is Dadaab Stories. If you go to that link, then you'll be able to interact with some of the refugees. You'll be able to see how they live their lives, what they do on a daily basis, what are their hopes and aspirations. One of the major contributions that FilmAid has made to the refugees in general is to have a media training program where we teach young people how to make films, and we teach young people how to talk about the issues that represent them. If there are issues of identity, how can they use media? How can they use media to address these issues? How do they use media to help them as a community begin dialogue on their identity? So once we arm them with the skills, we also run a series of film festivals. So every year, FilmAid runs a festival in Nairobi, in Kakuma, and in Dadaab. So not only do we provide the skills, but we also provide a platform through which some of the issues that they are raised, some of the films that are produced can be shared with a wide audience. And we also provide an avenue for dialogue among the community members themselves on the issues that affect them, with a view that it can promote more tolerance. So I'll leave you with a music video that was made in the Dadaab refugee camp by some of the youth that we're training. In the video, we have Somali musicians, we have South Sudanese musicians, and we have other community members represented, and they're all coming together to say, enough is enough. Can we give peace a chance? Who is going to make sure that our children's children don't have to spend all their lives as refugees in the middle of nowhere. So I just played. If you feel like getting up and dancing along to it, it will be very welcome. It's just 3 minutes long. Oh, here we are.
Muchana permer nyanga opio chuya bara manya bedmer mama mara bero no poke bedmer mana tege chui teno mer bero ko oni banu to men tor aduno ngi pinya wito no cholo utuma na lor amanya pisa manya lapa manya mer au amanya amaharo amanya nabat yao black ski one pap gol mara be eno japinaro en kido margi nyuta mer ana budi chiu unaga kulpi anwe bodo ko kemer ne jure lambi bonjia
c'est que je vais la paix, c'est que je vais l'amour, c'est que je vais la paix, c'est que je vais l'amour. What we need is love, love, love. What we need is peace, peace, peace. What we need is love, 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 love. Ni mara ngapi amani na kuandikia, lakini bado hujaniambia. Vifuani damu imetumwagikia, tumeshindwa kuvumilia. Since when you gone, life is hard. It's street, we are feeling so bad. Napenda tuwe pamoja kana inchi wazalendo. Tuishi kwa amani, tuonyeshane upendo. Tushikane, nitubwane, tukikosana, tusameane. Tuwe hamwe, tusitengane. Abantu bose ndabakunda cyane.
dalkeni wacna dadkeni wacna dalkeni wacna dadkeni wacna alnoogay nabad iyo barwaaqo idinkuna aamin 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 aamin